Hi there. I want to talk about corporate bullies. Now, this subject covers a wide range of organisations in this country, Australia, and globally that use their corporate strength and power to suppress the very people that they rely on to be a business. These bullies have departments that are obviously being directed by management to use whatever means necessary to deflect responsibility of misconduct. Recently in Australia, we've had a banking royal commission, which for the whole of 2018 has focused on misconduct in the banking and finance industry. And a lot of misconduct has been brought to light from the major banks in this country, the big four, ANZ, Westpac, National Australia Bank and Commonwealth, and some of the smaller institutions as well. The Royal Commission has focused on key areas of misconduct such as fees for no service, unsuitable lending, superannuation, insurance, and other services offered by these institutions. The Royal Commission has grilled many of the management teams of each of these organisations, including the CEOs of the Big Four and several other organisations. And one thing seems to be apparent throughout the testimonies that have been provided by these individuals. They are publicly acknowledging that there are problems, and they are certainly appearing on face value to be committed to reform and to remediation for those customers who have been affected by this misconduct. But I speak as one of those customers of one of these big four banks, and I am so very disappointed by the fact that I believed that this Royal Commission that put these organisations in the spotlight would actually serve to improve and perhaps push the responsibility of these organisations to actually do the right thing and the honourable thing by customers who have been the victims of this misconduct. But in actuality, it seems that due to the extreme focus that is now on these organisations, and I suppose in light of the flood of complaints that there will likely be towards these organisations, they are ducking for cover, and they are in fact covering up more of the misconduct than resolving it, it would seem. A couple of years ago, I applied for a home loan with one of the big four banks, and through a finance broker, I obtained a loan which I believed at the time to be suitable for the purchase and renovation of a domestic property. I was naive because I suppose I went into this broker seeking finance and didn't question the conduct, however unethical it may have seemed, because I suppose I was a borrower and I was simply seeking finance. So rather than question their conduct, I went along with whatever I was presented with. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, of course, these brokers and indeed loans managers of banks work on remuneration bonuses for the credit contracts that they issue to new business or new clients. So their incentive is always going to be monetary. It's always going to be basically the draw card for them to seek new business and to go after that new business. And in fact, in this particular instance, I was provided with a loan that was even larger than what I originally had applied for. And I think that is no doubt because bonuses or remuneration for new loan business would be calculated on as a percentage of the loan amount. And so, of course, the higher the loan amount, the bigger the remuneration or the bonus or the incentive. So it's not hard to see that these individuals are doing whatever is necessary to obtain new business. And to that end, they, in many instances, and mine included, have breached the Australian National Credit Act in providing what is an entirely unsuitable loan, a loan that they would no doubt have known was unserviceable for the life of the loan, and ultimately has led me to default and to be forced to sell my primary place of residence as a result. My initial intentions were to renovate this home and to make it a home for myself and my partner. We undertook the work in such a way that it would be to the specification that we were happy with as our home. The disappointing thing, I suppose, for me is that at no time were we advised against engaging with the bank and committing to this loan contract. And I suppose if the people that we dealt with, the loans manager and the finance broker, I suppose if they had been honourable and ethical people, they would no doubt have pointed out that this, by all accounts, based on my finances, my financial income and my financial position, was an unsuitable credit contract and would more than likely end in the default of the loan. So these individuals basically entered me into this contract knowing full well that the only way I would be able to repay the loan, or at least service the loan repayments, would be to sell my primary place of residence. And in doing so, according to the National Credit Act, they have breached this act by providing an unsuitable credit contract. And the Credit Act very clearly states that in order for a contract or credit contract to be suitable, the borrower needs to be able to demonstrate an ability to not only repay the loan in the short term, but to be able to repay the loan for the life of the loan. I went along with unscrupulous behaviour, and it was certainly my fault that I accepted that and simply went along with it. I mean, I suppose I can argue that I was coerced into signing a credit contract, but that's not the case. I was seeking finance. I went in willingly, and I undertook or engaged with these individuals and signed the acceptance of the loan that was provided. So I committed to it willingly. However, the onus is on the lender to ensure that the credit contract is suitable. And the lender failed to do that in this instance. And I suppose that is what my chief complaint would be about. I believe that any lender should be ethical above all else, and not simply provide a credit contract to somebody that they know is in an unsuitable financial position simply to be remunerated for their efforts. That is unethical behaviour. And unfortunately, it has, as I said, led myself and my partner to default and to be forced to sell our home, which we have spent 18 months renovating and many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we will likely sell this property at a loss due to a weak property market. And the only recourse that we have is to, I suppose, make an attempt to sue the bank for loss. But then, of course, these individuals who have obviously worked in this industry for long enough to know how to fly under the radar. It's a little bit like nailing jelly to the wall. These people know how to fly under the radar. They know how to hide the misconduct, and even the investigations team within these organisations, certainly in the organisation that I'm dealing with, seem to have a knack of dismissing claims by simply accepting the testimony from those responsible as being credible. And of course, anybody responsible for this sort of misconduct will no doubt lie to hide the misconduct, because they know, of course, that this sort of behaviour is always dealt with harshly, and they would no doubt lose their position within the organisation. I wrote several emails to the CEO of this company, and while this individual did respond, however briefly, they delegated, which in fairness I suppose is the position that they're in. They delegated this matter to staff who, unfortunately, I don't believe shares the same commitment as their management team to reform. They seem to be entirely focused on the deflection of responsibility, and therefore the dismissal of my claims and the prevention of my accessing any sort of compensation for the situation, which leaves me in a very untenable position, because I'm now facing default, must sell my home, and this is entirely due to, I can't say that, this is primarily due to the misconduct of the individuals who provided the loan. I must take part of the responsibility for seeking the finance in the first place and the amount that I was seeking, and blindly believing that I could, with my own business income, service the loan. However, I will always maintain that there is a duty of care. There is certainly a National Credit Act in place to prevent unsuitable lending, and those guidelines were not adhered to by these people. And because of that, yes, I sought a loan that was unsuitable, but yes, they provided this loan that was unsuitable, and basically entered me into a credit contract that I had no ability to repay, certainly based on my current or previous annual income. I believe that I would be able to service the loan with income through my business had I been successful in acquiring a full-time contract. But unfortunately, as with many industries in IT, things can be very busy or very quiet. And things throughout 2018 were decidedly quiet. So unfortunately, my plans for being able to service the loan did not come to fruition, and as a result, my low earnings did not allow me to maintain payments for the loan. But beyond all of that, there is a certain element within these organisations, and I've called it corporate thuggery. And it simply is the fact that even with credible, I would say irrefutable evidence that this misconduct occurred, these organisations would rather hide the misconduct, refute the claims of borrowers, such as myself, and continue down the same path that they have done so in past years, which has actually led them to this point now where they're being scrutinised by a Royal Commission. So, in effect, they are simply repeating old habits, old bad habits. And it's disappointing that when I believed this Royal Commission would actually provide borrowers with some level of access to remediation, thinking that these corporations would feel that it was not only appropriate but necessary to provide this remediation in light of the focus that has been put upon them. But it does not appear to be the case, because when I sought remediation, all I received was deflection. And it was purposeful deflection. It was not so much that the information or credible evidence that I provided was in question. It was that it was taken on board and a response was crafted by the investigations team to completely dismiss those claims and, of course, to absolve the organisation of misconduct. And that's a pretty sad state of affairs when that happens, because the expectation, of course, is with any investigations unit within a major organisation, they will investigate. And that's what people, borrowers, clients or customers expect. We go in with that expectation because we assume that the teams in these organisations are dedicated to finding the truth and to actually eradicating the issue and remediating for the client. But that has not been the case here. And I don't believe it to be isolated, because the way in which the responses that I received from this bank were sent, they were templated and essentially followed a certain formula to so exactly dismiss my claims and so exactly support the testimonies of the criminals that are involved in the misconduct. So where does that leave me? It leaves me in a position where I will sell my home, as I have no choice but to do so. I will seek some form of compensation from the organisation that has led me to this point. But the difficulty of that, of course, is that these individuals have done this for an extended period of time and know exactly how to elude the investigative team. And unfortunately, it will become a case of their word against mine. And unfortunately, when it is their word against mine, well, the borrower, the external entity, will fail because the business itself needs to be preserved at all costs, it would seem. And that also goes against the testimony that's been provided by many of the leaders of these organisations who want the customers and the public to believe that they are open and what's the word? Not just open, but committed, I suppose. Committed to the resolution of matters and issues. But as always, actions speak louder than words, and it will be the actions of these individuals that we will be able to determine whether or not remediation is actually happening. I'm in a position now when I need to fight for what is right. Sadly, I need to do it legally. I need to pay to do it legally. But these organisations will push people to do that. It would seem that without any sort of legal action being suggested by victims of misconduct, these organisations will not act. They will not act in fairness. They will not act just to be reasonable. They will only act when they are pushed to do so. And that's disappointing, to say the least, because it shouldn't be that way. When organisations see a need for remediation, a need to resolve major issues within their organisation, they should take those opportunities and do so. They shouldn't have to wait for people to push them to do so. That's wrong. That's the wrong way to earn points, brownie points from customers. Anyway, this has been my first live stream. I wanted to put this on record. I wanted to speak about corporate thuggery, and there's so much of it that goes on. This is obviously just a fraction of a tip of the iceberg. But I will speak more on this subject because I know that there are many victims of this. And I have gone through with my partner a very trying and difficult time, financial hardship, and it's never easy. And I can completely understand with other people. I can certainly sympathise with what other people may go through when they're being screwed by organisations simply because the organisation knows that they can do so. And that's wrong on every level. Thank you for watching.